Hello, good morning. My name is Felipe Garcia, and today, as part of this assignment, I'll be talking about the rise and history of the Roman Empire, and maybe, if I have time, a little bit of the reasons why it declined and why it ended in about 450 AD. It's more or less when it's believed that the Roman Empire broke. But let's go ahead and start with Roma Invicta. So Rome started on it was a small town in the 8th century BC, and basically they grew from a very small town on Italy's Tiber River into one of the largest empire that it encompasses most of Europe, Britain, Asia, Northern Africa, and most of the Mediterranean islands as well. Also, Rome is responsible for many of the what we call the Romance language, which is Italian, French, my primary language, which is Spanish, Portuguese, and so on, which all derive from Latin. Also, through the Roman Empire, we got major religions such as Christianity that happened during the reign of Rome. Now, the legend of how Rome originally started, we probably all heard it before, which was the twin sons of a mythological god named Mars, which was the god of war, and they were Romulus and Remus. They were left to die basically. They were raised up by a wolf, and they founded and became the first king of Rome in about 753 BC. Yeah, it was after that reign. It was a succession of several reigns from Latin and Etruscan civilizations. In Rome, believe it or not, did not start as the Senate or everything that we associate. We usually associate Rome with the Senate and the beginning of democracy, and of course the later stages, which was emperors. But Rome started originally as a monarchy, which ended in 509 BC, which it was overthrown by the people. And sometimes they believe that the reason why they got overthrown was because the rape of a virtuous noblewoman, which her name was Lucretia, by the king's son. Whichever the reason may be, Rome turned out to be from a monarchy into a republic. A republic means property of the people. And so this is how Rome started its period as a republic. So from the monarchy to the republic, one thing that was present was the key or the stone of what brought this system together was two annually elected magistrates that were called the consuls. They were also the ones in charge of the army. They were elected from mainly the Senate, which at the time was dominated by wealthy people. And it was at the beginning a struggle between the regular folks and the wealthy or the elite class per se in in regards to who had what kind of power. And it was a struggle. There were some concessions, and eventually the what is called plebeians or the common people have their own body. They call the tribunes, which could at this time initiate or even veto legislation. An important development in Rome was in by the year of 450 BC, the first code of law was inscribed on 12 bronze tablets, and they were displayed on the Roman Forum. And this sort of laws were about everything from legal procedures to civil rights, property rights. All future Roman civil law was based around this tablets. And by the year 300 BC, real political power was really only centered in the Senate, and at this time it really only included members of the patrician and wealthy plebeian families, but the common folks were really not that well represented at this point. After this, it comes the period known as the military expansion. During the Roman early stages, the military and expansionism was important to them, and even though the Gauls managed to sack and burn Rome in the year 390 BC, they really bounced back quite effectively under the leadership of Camillus, who eventually, with his leadership, managed to gain control of the entire Italian peninsula by the year of 264 BC. Then after that, they fought very well-known wars known as the Punic Wars with Carthage, which was at the time probably the only superpower that could rival the Roman one. And Carthage was a powerful city-state in northern Africa. By the end of the first two Punic Wars, Rome was in full control of Sicily, the western Mediterranean, and much of Spain. By the Third Punic War, which was from 149 to 146 BC, the Romans at this point they capture and destroy the city of Carthage, and they just basically made away with that city. It is believed they were such a thorn in Rome that they even salted the city. They sold their surviving inhabitants into slavery, and they made it a Roman province. And it was during this time that the Rome was also looking into Macedonia, and it was when they defeated King Philip V of Macedonia in what is known as the Macedonian Wars, and turning his kingdom into another Roman province. This military conquest though also led to a cultural growth as a society, as the Romans really benefited greatly from getting contact with advanced cultures as the Greeks, in warfare cultures as Carthage. Now, the first Roman literature appeared around the year 240 BC, which were translations to the Greek and from Latin. And as we know, because of the gods they both share, Romans will eventually adopt much of Greek art, philosophy, and religion. There was only basically name changes, but for the most part, they were they were very similar. And this is where you'll see Rome growing. This is where you still have a Senate. This is a little bit before the guy we all know, Caesar. And but it was here, still during the Senate, that Rome acquired a lot of its territory that we know. After this, though, we see basically the decadence of the Senate and the Republic in general, and this gives rise, of course, to the emperors of later stages. But the turmoil started because of the gap between the rich and the poor were, were getting to be too wide. It was getting out of hand, and people that try to address it, like Tiberius and Gaius in the year 1333, I mean 133 BC, ended up being killed because of it. So from basically the year 133 to 63 BC, which is a lot of time, the power that the Senate had was really diluted, and it gave rise to a consul named Pompey, which will take center stage in Rome's politics in the future. When Pompey returned to Rome, he really formed a alliance known as the First Triumvirate with Marcus Lucius Crassus and, of course, Julius Caesar. Now, Julius Caesar was giving the governorship of Gaul, which was what he was looking for, and this is where he later has the ambition to conquer the rest of Gaul for uh, for Roman glory. So Caesar did all this conquering, and by the year 54 BC, most of Gaul was already under Rome control. And after this, he decided to cross the Rubicon River, something that is widely known, and decided to declare himself the dictator or emperor of Rome in the year 45 BC. Unfortunately, though, as we know, less than a year later, he was murdered by Brutus, Gaius Cassius, and the Senate in general that betrayed him and took away, which this created, and this is where I would say, and not that decline, but this sort of cycle of civil wars within Rome to see who gets the power of the empire was what eventually would lead to its downfall. At this point, though, there is basically a civil war that goes uh, between Octavian and Anthony with the help of Queen Cleopatra of Egypt. And in the Battle of Actium, basically Octavian wins, and Anthony and Cleopatra they commit suicide. And by 29 BC, Octavian was the sole leader of Rome and all its provinces. And this basically is what starts the age of the emperors. We have some great ones like Pompey, or we also have Constantine, and then we also have Caligula, Nero, and some others that were really the best ones. But overall, there were 200 years basically of almost peace, where there was no war despite the political time being a little tumultuous. The general citizen was at peace. This, however, wasn't going to last, and Rome eventually ends up disappearing and breaking off by the 5th century. There is one thing I would like to mention. Diocletian was the emperor that decided that Rome was too big for one head to govern. So he divided between the West and East Roman Empire. This was a temporary fix, but it was a stable one. Now, Constantine managed to reunify Rome in 324. He moved the Roman capital to the Greek city of Byzantium, which was later renamed Constantinople. And but an important fact was that this was the Council of Nicaea of 325, which made Christianity, which was really sort of like an obscure religion that was widely persecuted on the empire, the Rome's official religion. And however, as great as Constantine was as an emperor, 30 years after his death, the empire had to be separated, and pretty much after that, the Eastern Roman Empire actually lasted all the way to the Middle Ages. It was a great example of good leadership, what good leadership can do to your province. However, the West Roman Empire just started losing zone after zone after zone. They lost Britain around 410, Spain, North Africa by 430. Gauls and Attila managed to get Italy by 450, and by September of 476, a Germanic prince named Odovacar won control of the Roman army in Italy, and therefore the destruction of Rome. So there are a lot of things we can take from this short walk through history. Rome is responsible for many of the things we enjoy today, not only language and great literature, but tactical formations, science, engineering. There are a lot of things that will be lost through the Dark Ages after their collapse that took a lot of people centuries to go back to that level of scientific discovery that the Romans had. The ambition to be the better they could be, the Vini Vici Vidi, I came, I saw, I conquer, all of this that we associate with Rome, which is strength, its democracy to a certain extent, came from a people that started from a very small town in the Etruscan League in Italy, and it's just amazing. It's always amazed me how much the Roman civilization managed to accomplish in such a wide gap in history. I mean, at some point, their their empire stretched to most of the known world at the time, or what was the known world for them, of course. And well, that will conclude my presentation for today. It was really a pleasure talking about Rome and its contribution to society and just the brief history of their rise and fall.